When I sat down for a presentation for Zaum's recently unveiled Zero Parades at Gamescom earlier this week, I expected Disco Elysium to be the legally problematic elephant in the room. Sure, Zaum still owns the IP, but its planned development of a sequel never went anywhere, and any mention of the game nowadays is only going to anger the very audience it needs to pull in. By the end of this presentation, I believe the team had mentioned Disco Elysium and Harry Dubois more than anyone. As you likely saw in the reveal, Zero Parades is trying to recapture the magic of Disco Elysium, but I wish it didn't feel it had to.
Zero Parades looks the part, but it isn't a Disco Elysium successor.
Zero Parades is very much trying to build upon Disco Elysium, not just imitate it. The project seems to come from another timeline where the ZAUM fallout never happened, since from a mechanical perspective, this is exactly what you would expect from a Disco follow-up. The thought cabinet is back, albeit in a new form. The skill checks are here and expanded upon, with a new gimmick thrown in for good measure. The UI, the presentation, it's all very familiar and improved on what millions loved about Disco Elysium. It's only once we learn about the game's premise that the lack of Disco's original writing team becomes apparent, because right now it just doesn't have the same mysterious and metatextual allure. In Zero Parades, we play as Herschel Wilk, a spy for a fictional communist government who is sent out on an assignment. She might share Harry Dubois' self-destructive nature, but that may be where the similarities end, hence the changes to the thought cabinet. Unlike Harry, Herschel knows exactly who she is. It just appears to be up to us whether or not she likes what she sees as we explore and define this new world. In the presentation, I was shown a scenario in which Herschel reflects on a past event, prompting the player to embrace the thought and lesson of the story or repress it, with each conclusion having different effects to her stats and build. This is where Zero Parades could carve out its own identity. Politics are readily apparent, but from what I saw, that isn't what's being explored. The narrative instead is more focused on Herschel's psychology and personality. When I asked, I was told that Herschel's values won't be as changeable as Harry's, so I hope that we can at least explore why she believes the things that she does, and perhaps how the politics of the world shaped her into the person she is today. Another new feature is exertion, an option that surfaces whenever you make a dice roll on a skill check. If you hit that option, your odds of succeeding increase, but Herschel might take a hit to a stat like anxiety because she was straining herself to get something done or convince another player of her intentions.
I like the new direction, but the jury is out on the writing. In a snippet of gameplay, I glimpsed a quick look at the conversation system. It was between Herschel and her handler back home, who asked what she had been up to since she arrived. Herschel could say something along the lines of checking out the hot singles in her area. Now, Disco Elysium is a game that made the phrase piss faggot work, so far be it from me to judge a piece of dialogue out of context, but there is an incredibly high chance that whoever wrote this iconic phrase and made it work within the context of Disco's world isn't at ZAUM anymore. Hence my concern about whether Zero Parades can stick the landing. This was only one example, and the premise has pulled me in, but Zero Parades has a lot to prove. Honestly, I would have loved to have gone into Zero Parades without making all of these direct comparisons to Disco, but that's precisely what ZAUM wants us to do. I'm worried that Zero Parades is trying to emulate Disco without understanding it. To me, the beauty of Harry as a protagonist isn't that he was the main character, it's that he wasn't. His being in Revachol was a failure of the world around him. He spirals and lashes out and still tries to get the job done, yet the world continues on without him. He can try and run from himself, but the world has seen him for who he is, and it's up to him to do the right things in order to enact change and alter the ways in which this entire universe perceives him. On the other hand, Herschel appears to be much more of a main character, especially if the game revolves around exploring her psyche. That is not a bad din at all for any other game, but it is for a game that is trying to be Disco Elysium. Ultimately, ZAUM would be better off trying to distance itself from Disco entirely, perhaps letting former devs work on another project in the setting, and double down on Zero Parade's strengths. Right now, Zero Parade certainly looks the part and is trying to bring something new to the table for this new setting. However, ZAUM clearly isn't interested in letting Disco go, and I can't help but fear that this will only set a good game up for failure and only worsen the studio's reputation in the eyes of fans.